Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at the fundamental structure of belief and non-belief, actually.
And our guide for this is the one and only C.S. Lewis.
Exactly. And for you listening, our whole mission here is to just pull out his incredible roadmap, these key distinctions he made to figure out where Christianity fits in the whole landscape of worldviews. We're really looking for those aha moments.
He's a fantastic guide for this because he comes at it like a philosopher, not just a preacher. And he starts his whole argument by telling you one thing Christians do not have to believe.
Which is such a clever way to begin.
It really is. It immediately kind of clears the deck of all the usual assumptions.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Section 1, this whole spectrum of belief. What is this freedom that he's talking about?
Well, Lewis says that if you're a Christian, you are totally free to think that other religions have, well, at least some hint of the truth.
So you don't have to believe they're all just, completely wrong from top to bottom.
Exactly. He's arguing directly against that idea.
Yeah.
There's almost giving you this intellectual permission slip to find bits of truth scattered everywhere.
Okay, but a modern atheist might immediately say, well, hold on, I'm free to believe whatever I want. That's not unique.
But that's where Lewis does this brilliant little flip.
Right.
He argues that if you're a committed atheist, you actually have to take a much, much more rigid stance. You must believe that the main point of all the world's religions, for thousands of years,
That this central human impulse.
is simply one huge mistake. That's his phrase.
So in Lewis's view, the atheist is the one who's actually forced into the more dogmatic position. They have to write off the core belief of, well, most people who have ever lived.
Precisely.
Mm.
Lewis even talks about his own time as a skeptic, saying he constantly had to explain away why the vast majority of the human race was wrong about the one thing that mattered most to them. He said that becoming a Christian, funnily enough, allowed him to take a more liberal view.
Because he could now see those echoes of truth elsewhere.
Exactly.
But, this isn't just saying anything goes, right? It's not total relativism. Christianity has to be distinct at some point.
Oh, absolutely. And he tackles that head on with what he calls the arithmetic analogy.
Okay, what's that?
He says, look, being a Christian does mean that you believe where Christianity differs from other religions, it's right and they're wrong.
There's the exclusivity.
Yes, but think about a math problem. There's only one right answer. All the other answers are wrong, technically. But, and this is the key, some wrong answers are much nearer being right than others.
That is incredibly clarifying. Wow. So you can have a standard of truth while still valuing things that are close to it.
You got it. And that brings us to his first really big division of humanity, his broadest point, really.
Oh, okay.
He says, if you zoom way out, humanity splits into two camps on the biggest question of all.
And camp 1 is?
The massive majority. Everyone who believes in some kind of god or gods. He lumps in ancient Greeks, Romans, Hindus, Platonists, just about everyone, everywhere across all of time.
And that leaves camp 2, which is the stark minority.
He calls them the modern Western European materialist. This is the person who believes that matter and space just sort of happen to exist.
And everything else, our thoughts, consciousness, our ideas of justice, it's all just a random byproduct of atoms pumping around.
That's the view. And for Lewis, the first crucial step is seeing that Christianity lines up with the great majority of humanity against this relatively new materialist idea.
That's a powerful way to frame it. It positions Christianity not as some strange outlier, but as part of the historical human consensus that reality is not meaningless.
It is, and it sets up his next big question perfectly.
Which is, okay, for that huge majority of people who do believe in a God, what kind of God are we actually talking about? Because there are two totally different ideas.
A critical distinction. And the first idea is pantheism.
God is beyond good and evil.
Right. For a pantheist, our ideas of good and bad are just, a human point of view. They're temporary. As you get wiser, you'd stop using those labels.
Because from the divine perspective, it all just is.
It all just is. Because for the pantheist, God is the universe. He's the totality of everything. The cancer and the surgeon who cuts it out are both just parts of God.
And that's where he brings in that really sharp example, isn't it? The surgeon and the cancer.
It is. You say a cancer is bad because it kills a man, but you could just as easily say the surgeon is bad because he kills the cancer.
It all depends on the point of view.
Exactly. And serious philosophers held this view. Lewis mentions Hegel, for instance. For them, these moral conflicts we see are all resolved in some higher unity.
Okay, so that's idea 1. Let's pivot to the other one, the theistic view.
This is the view of Jews, Muslims, and Christians.
And this God is not neutral at all?
Not at all. This God is quite definitely good or righteous. He takes sides. This God loves love and hates hatred and wants us to behave in certain ways.
So the moral law isn't just our opinion, it reflects God's actual character.
Yes, and that leads to the second related difference, the relationship between God and the universe. For the pantheist, you said God is the universe.
Right, like God animates the universe the way a soul animates a body.
Correct. But for the theist, God invented and made the universe.
Like an artist and a painting.
That's the exact analogy Lewis uses. A painter is not his picture. He existed before it, and he doesn't die if you burn the canvas.
The beauty in the painting comes from him, but he himself is not in the painting.
Precisely. God is separate from and sovereign over his creation.
And this distinction, maker versus animator, is so important because it's what makes sense of evil and suffering, right?
It's the only way it makes sense. If God is separate and truly good, then we can look at something like cruelty or cancer and say that is contrary to his will.
But if God were just everything, then cruelty would also just be a part of God.
You'd have to accept it as a necessary part of the whole. But for the Christian, the theist, it means something has gone wrong with the world God made.
Which is why Lewis calls Christianity a fighting religion.
It's not about passive acceptance. It insists on our putting things right again.
And this is where he uses that famously strong language.
Oh, yes. He contrasts the two responses to suffering. The pantheist says, if you could only see it from the divine point of view, you would realize that this also is God.
And the Christian replies,
Don't talk damn nonsense.
it's a shocking choice of words, but it really drives the point home. The gap between those two views is absolute.
It is. One sees suffering as part of the divine dance, the other sees it as an enemy invasion. And that whole problem, the problem of evil, is what sets up Lewis's final move.
Okay, section 3. This is where it gets really personal for him, isn't it? The collapse of his own atheism.
It is. He admits that for years he just refused to listen to any Christian answers about suffering. He said it was just simpler and easier to say that the world was not made by any intelligent power.
The Christian position just seemed too complicated. A good God letting all this happen. It was easier to just say the universe is a chaotic mess, so no God.
That was his argument. That was his fortress.
But then the very thing he used to argue against God, it became the thing that convinced him.
The intellectual boomerang, yes. This is the moment. He was arguing that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust.
And then he stopped and asked himself a devastatingly simple question.
How had I got this idea of just and unjust?
A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line.
Exactly. What was he comparing the universe with when he called it unjust? Where did you get his idea of straight?
And that's the paradox, isn't it? If he says, oh, my idea of justice is just my private idea, just a feeling I have.
Then his whole argument against God collapses. Because the argument only works if the world is really unjust, not just that he personally doesn't like it.
To say something is truly unjust implies a real standard of justice that exists somewhere.
You have to assume the straight line is real. And so, in the very act of trying to prove that all of reality was senseless, he was forced to assume that one part of it, his own idea of justice, was full of sense.
It's a brilliant intellectual corner to be backed into. He concludes that atheism turns out to be too simple.
It is. It tries to explain away the problem of evil by just getting rid of all meaning. But our ability to even recognize evil is itself a sign of meaning.
And that leads to his final analogy.
The darkness analogy. He says if the whole universe had no meaning, we would never have been able to find that out.
Right. Just as if there were no light in the universe and no creatures with eyes, we'd never know it was dark. The word dark would be meaningless.
The fact that we can feel the wrongness proves there must be a right. His best argument against God turned out to be his best argument for God.
A truly remarkable piece of thinking.
So, just to recap for you listening, we've walked through Lewis's entire roadmap.
3 big ideas. First, how Christianity actually aligns with the majority of human belief and, in some ways, is less rigid than modern atheism.
Second, that huge split between the pantheistic God who is the universe and the theistic God who made it. That's the key to understanding the problem of evil.
And finally, how our own deep-seated sense of justice makes pure materialism, well, an illogical position.
And really for you, the learner, this whole framework just gives you such clear language. The next time you're in a conversation about belief, You can move past the fuzzy labels and ask the real question.
Is the God you're talking about the cosmic process or a separate righteous maker?
That one question, it's the hinge on which almost everything else turns.
And as we end this deep dive, Lewis leaves all of us with a really provocative thought to take with us.
It's a challenge, really.
It is. As you go through your week, you see things in the news in your own life, and you feel that powerful urge to call something unjust or cruel or just plain crooked, a tragedy, an unfairness.
When you feel that, Lewis forces you to ask yourself a question.
What straight line are you measuring that against? What absolute standard that isn't just matter makes that judgment of yours meaningful?
Something to think about this week.